Let me paint the scene for you. You're Marc Márquez, you're battling at the front of a MotoGP sprint race. The track is getting slick. The rain is starting to fall. 5 laps remain, you're fighting for every 10th, trying to hold off your championship rivals. And then at the final corner it happens. The front end tucks, the bike slides out from under you, you hit the gravel. Most riders in that moment would sit up, dust themselves off, and accept the DNF. They'd walk back to the garage with their head down, already thinking about the next race. But Marc Márquez is not most riders. Instead of giving up, he made a split-second decision that nobody in the paddock saw coming. And when the sprint race was over, he was standing on the top step of the podium anyway. This actually happened. It went down at the Spanish GP Sprint in Jerez on April 25, 2026. And the reason the entire MotoGP world is still buzzing isn't just that Márquez won, it's how he pulled it off and whether he should have been allowed to do it at all. In this video, we're going deep on the full story, what actually happened out on track, the rulebook explanation that cleared him, why his rivals are genuinely angry, and what this whole episode tells us about the kind of competitor Marc Márquez really is. Stick with me until the end because I've got a question for you that I genuinely want you to answer. The setup: a tactical chess match in the rain. To understand why this controversy blew up, you need to know what the situation looked like heading into those final laps. The Jerez sprint was already a tactical chess match before the rain even came into the picture. Track conditions were shifting. The surface was starting to dampen. Every team on the pit wall was watching the sky and watching their data, trying to figure out the exact right moment to call their rider in for a bike swap to wet weather tires. Márquez was running in second place with 5 laps remaining. He had actually been considering pitting on that very lap. But when he looked across and saw his brother Alex Márquez riding for Gresini, staying out on his current tires, he decided to mirror that call and stay out too. On paper, it was a reasonable read of the situation. Alex had been rapid all weekend. If he thought the slick tires could still do the job, maybe they could. But the track had other ideas. At the final corner on a surface that was now properly damp, Márquez lost the front end and went down. It wasn't a massive high side. He walked away physically fine, but the race was effectively over for him. Or so everyone thought. The move, waiting in the gravel, then breaking every expectation. Here where it gets wild. When Márquez slid into the runoff area at the final corner, he found himself in a genuinely unusual position. The standard pit lane entry point at Jerez is located before the final corner. He had already passed it. Under normal circumstances, a rider in that situation simply waits for the session to end and takes the DNF. Márquez didn't do that. Instead, he waited calmly in the runoff area for every single other rider to go past him, making absolutely sure the track was completely clear. Then, once the coast was clear, he took an unconventional route across the grass to access the pit lane, bypassing the standard entry line because he'd already gone too far past it. His bike was still running, the engine hadn't cut out, and because of that he was technically still a participant in the race, not a retiree. He rolled into the Ducati garage, the crew scrambled into action, he switched to a bike already fitted with wet weather tires. Back out on track now with the right rubber for the conditions, Márquez began hunting. He reeled in Firmin Aldeguer. Then he passed his own factory Ducati teammate Francesco Bagnaia to take the race win. One of the most unlikely and chaotic sprint victories in recent MotoGP memory. The paddock didn't know whether to applaud or protest. The rulebook: how was he not penalized? So the obvious question: how was he not penalized? Because from the outside, crossing the grass to enter the pit lane looks like exactly the kind of thing that should draw a black and orange flag at minimum. According to the official MotoGP clarification released after the race, Márquez entered the pit lane in accordance with the published definition. He crossed the pit lane entry timing point, the designated entrance where the 60 km/h signs are displayed. Crucially, there is no specific regulation stating that riders must enter the pit lane from one fixed physical location. In other words, the rulebook defines pit lane entry by a timing point, not by a painted line on the track surface. Márquez hit that timing point, box ticked. Furthermore, he didn't disregard any marshal instructions. He didn't create a dangerous situation when crossing the track because he waited until it was completely clear. And he didn't shortcut a significant section of the circuit, meaning no meaningful advantage was gained through the route he took. MotoGP sporting regulations also allow riders who accidentally leave the circuit to rejoin at a point indicated by officials or at a location where they haven't benefited from leaving the track. Márquez ticked those boxes too. He left the track involuntarily through a crash. He waited for the track to be safe, and he rejoined without cutting the circuit in any meaningful way. No investigation was opened, no penalty was issued, the result stood. When Márquez was asked about it afterward, he was almost casual about the whole thing. He said, "The rules are clear. If you don't gain time, don't create a dangerous situation, and don't cut corners from the service road, you're within the regulations." His attitude was essentially, "I read the rules, I acted within them, what's the problem?" The controversy, letter of the law versus spirit of the law. The problem, according to some of his rivals, is that the letter of the law and the spirit of the law aren't always the same thing. Johan Zarco of LCR Honda was among the most outspoken voices after the race, publicly questioning whether Márquez should have been allowed to keep the victory. The argument from that camp is straightforward. A rider who crashes should not be able to access the pit lane via a route that wasn't the designated one, switch bikes, and then win the race. It feels like an exploit, even if it isn't technically illegal. And there's something to that. MotoGP penalty and regulation system has faced criticism for years over inconsistency. There have been numerous occasions where riders receive penalties for incidents that seemed far less ambiguous than this one. When a gray area exists in the rulebook and a top-level competitor finds it and uses it to win a race, it naturally raises the question of whether that gray area needs to be closed. To be fair to the stewards, they had to make a call based on the rules as they exist right now, not as someone might wish they existed. And based on the rules as written, Márquez did nothing wrong. But don't be surprised if this specific scenario gets addressed in a regulation update before too long. Márquez's own reaction, honest, self-aware, and surprisingly humble. What makes this story even more interesting is how Márquez himself framed the win afterward. He didn't come out pumping his fists and talking about genius strategy. He was remarkably straightforward about it. He called the win lucky. Specifically, he said he was lucky that the crash happened at the final corner near the pit lane entrance, because if he'd lost the front at turn 1 instead, none of this would have been possible. He also openly admitted that the smarter call would have been to pit the lap before. Watching Alex stay out influenced his thinking, and that's ultimately what put him in the position of crashing in the first place. And in a move that showed genuine self-awareness, he acknowledged that his brother Alex was simply faster than him at Jerez this weekend, roughly half a second quicker on a flying lap and 3 to 4 tenths faster in race pace. Alex, for his part, eventually crashed while still on slick tires as the conditions deteriorated, robbing him of what could have been a breakthrough result. So the Márquez who won that sprint was not the dominant, in-control Márquez of his prime championship years. It was a Márquez who made a mistake, got fortunate with where that mistake happened, and then had the mental sharpness to immediately figure out what his options were and act on them. That instinct, that refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat looks inevitable, is arguably what separates him from the rest. The bigger picture, what this tells us about racing at the highest level. Zoom out for a second and there are some genuinely interesting takeaways from what happened in Jerez. In a sport where everything happens at 200 plus km/h, the margins between winning and losing are absurdly thin. Race outcomes can be flipped not just by raw speed, but by decisions made in under a second, while a rider is literally picking himself up off the tarmac. The riders and teams who succeed at this level aren't just the fastest. They're the ones who understand the rules completely, think clearly under chaos, and find opportunities in situations where most people would already be mentally checking out. What Márquez did in Jerez was unconventional, controversial, and debatable. But it was also within the rules, completely legitimate. Whether you think it's brilliant or whether you think it's a loophole that shouldn't exist, one thing is undeniable. It made for one of the most memorable moments of the 2026 MotoGP season so far. Your turn, what do you think? All right, here where I need your take. Do you think Márquez genuinely deserved that win, or do you feel like he exploited a gap in the regulations that shouldn't have been there in the first place? There's genuinely no clear-cut right or wrong here. This is exactly the kind of debate that makes MotoGP so compelling. Drop your honest opinion in the comments below. I read everything and the best takes might just make it into the next video. If this kind of deep dive content is your thing, go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell. We cover every race and every controversy with the same level of detail. And if you've got a friend who follows MotoGP, send them this video. The more voices in the comments, the better the conversation gets. One last thing, your race prediction. Leave your race prediction in the comments right now. Who takes the Spanish Grand Prix tomorrow? Does Marquez back it up and complete the weekend double? Does Alex bounce back from his crash and take the main race? Or does someone completely different step up and catch everyone off guard? Drop your prediction below and we'll be back after Sunday's race to see who called it right. See you then, enjoy the racing.